Hello and welcome to the live lounge here at Open Banking Expo Canada 2026. Joining me now on the sofa is Maisie Bilotti, who is Senior Director of Advocacy at MX. Welcome to the live lounge.
Thank you, Ellie.
Lovely to have you. Maisie, you are speaking on the stage later today. What are you looking forward to most about that conversation?
I think the thing I'm most excited to talk about is the sort of data ownership versus data control. What's
Mm.
sort of the difference between those two things? And I think, Canada is in a place where they're moving from a sort of theoretical conversation about data ownership to actually the how of like, how are we actually going to implement this? What controls are consumers actually going to have over their data? What does that consumer right actually look like as it's effectuated in the ecosystem? And I think that's really exciting for businesses and consumers alike. And then also data quality, I think, is another really interesting part of the conversation. Um, this only works and matters for consumers if data is really high quality, and making sure that the ecosystem understands how to make sure that data is clean, and organized in a way that actually can be most useful for consumers when it actually lands in their hands and helps them with their financial health.
We're still fairly early in the day here at the expo, but based on what you've heard already from conversations you've had or overheard other people having on stage, what's different about this year's expo?
I can feel the excitement of kind of what I was referencing before, but like this is the moment where the rubber hits the road. I think with the regulation sort of just about to start being put into motion, people getting real guidance on what everything needs to look like to actually make this happen for Canada. I think this is the moment for businesses to really gear up and be ready for what needs to happen in the ecosystem for consumers. And I can feel excitement for that, which I think is really fun. I feel it from banks, fintechs, and aggregators like MX alike. I think everyone's really ready for the moment.
Well, look, as we mentioned, you're going to be on stage later today. Your session focuses on the future and an impact of the consumer-driven banking regulatory framework here in Canada. Why is this the right moment for this conversation, Maisie?
I think this is the moment because in Canada in particular, I think the ecosystem hasn't necessarily moved itself forward in a sort of market led way the way the US did. I think um, it's a really good moment that legislation and the regulation that comes from it can actually set the foundation for a really, really good system that's safe for consumers. And I think in Canada in particular, the sort of balance between safety and innovation is an important tension that I feel like has kind of peaked right now. And with that in mind, I think this is the moment for everyone to come together and really make it work for consumers.
Mhm. Um, we've got a lot of leaders in the room here today, people from all across the ecosystem, whether it's banks, fintechs, policymakers. What should they be going back to their teams with from today, and what should they be talking about, not just today, but tomorrow and beyond?
I think what I referenced earlier with sort of data cleanliness, data readiness. So basically, having your systems on your end ready to go out the door, for a consumer to be able to use in a different environment. Most usefully, I think data is not useful unless it's cleansed and categorized in a way that actually makes it useful for the consumer, or for a data recipient that's receiving the data. And so with that in mind, MX is actually very good at this. Plug for MX. MX is fabulous at data enhancement and cleansing. So there are a number of companies that help banks and fintechs with that, to do things like rather than someone seeing a transaction that's just X518 in your mobile banking app, being able to actually see, oh, I spent $5 at Tim Hortons, with a Tim Hortons logo. So that's that sort of thing I think will make a really big difference, for consumers if companies do their job to get everything kind of lined up to make it most useful for everyone.
So after a day like today, how do you leave feeling? Is it more cautious or more optimistic about where Canada is heading right now?
Really optimistic. It's interesting. It's a little bit in contrast to the US where we're we're having a little bit of like a slower back and forth process on regulation where everyone's a little bit just sitting there waiting to hear what's going to happen next, which I think has actually stalled open banking adoption a bit in the US with the lack of regulatory clarity. And it feels like Canada is actually really moving forward. I know it's been discussed for a long time, but this is the year it's actually happening. And I think that's why there are so many people at the conference this year so excited about this. So I'm feeling super optimistic. I think all these things are going to start falling into place. The ecosystem is going to benefit, and consumers are really going to start seeing options for different services that they can use in a way that's going to drive competition between businesses and ultimately better services for consumers.
And if there's one idea that you hope sticks from today, that people go away from today and leave with, what is it?
I think it really is the increase in competition that open banking can bring is good for everybody. I think it'll drive, existing sort of incumbents in the ecosystem to do better. They'll feel great about that. It'll take effort to retain their customers. New startups will get generated. And that's good for everyone. I think it's really good for the economy. I think it's really good for consumers. I think it's going to be really good for the financial health of Canadians overall.
Well, that's a really positive note to end on. Maisie, thank you so much for joining me in the Live Lounge.
Thank you, Ellie.